today's video, I'm going to introduce our special guests. We have Max the Moluccan. We have Tycho the Gray, who's on top of his cage right now. And the other half of your screen, we have Joanna Berger, who's an animal behaviorist. Yeah, we're doing a bit of a tug of war here. Want to do tug of war, buddy?
Yeah.
Trying to tell him that he wants to stay on his cage because I've got Max out here as well. I've actually moved the chair that Max sits on with me, and he sometimes plays on as well. He seems to take over my chair, but that's okay. He's over by the cage, which is not usual, just because Tycho, I limit his pumpkin and his squash inside the cage. Climb up? Yeah, that's a good bird. Oh, you're not in the mood? All right. And as you can see, there's not a lot left of that toy, and there's the detritus right there on the ground. Certainly my house is never going to be better than the gardens.
And like,
Tycho.
and yeah, this is great natural chewing behavior, very healthy, normal, good behavior for a bird to be doing. And it's totally natural for them to drop things onto the ground. They will drop seeds onto the ground in the wild, and that helps trees grow from those seeds. They are just naturally really messy eaters, and that's just how it is. So I am really happy to see Max having a really good time there.
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people get upset when they see their birds destroying toys, and I just want to say, well, what did you think the toys are meant for? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what they're for.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different designs of baby lynx. This one over here, it's just clipped onto the cage. You can see that it's been well chewed at, but for him, he likes to spin it around. He likes to tongue it. It's almost a little bit of a puzzle for him. And it's like, okay, this is a great toy. The foraging tray, what I was commenting on with this shot over here at the bottom of the cage, all of that paper under there, he chews up, throws underneath. I remove the paper that's got the ugly stuff on it, but he'll actually reach underneath, forage in there. He'll drop food or a toy in there. He'll reach down. So he builds his own foraging toy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and ground foraging is natural behavior, so they do eat food off of the ground in the wild. And so that's kind of what's happening there, reaching down to get the food. And then because of those, the cage grate at the that he has to reach through, that makes it an extra challenging puzzle. So.
Oh yeah, he absolutely loves that part. Not much luck, buddy. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's a reason why when I gave him this toy, it was a brand new toy. But he's had a really great 10 minutes destroying it, figuring out how to toss all of the bits on the ground. You know, it's a happy bird, and that's, I mean, the same with the squash. Tycho right now is sort of at the bottom of the cage. Squash is in there. He's been destroying it. He'll go back for round 2 in a few minutes. But it's actually very inexpensive toys. The rings here I reuse. I just link them onto another one of these woven bits. But I think that's one of his favorites to destroy. You can get his beak right into it. He has to figure out what to do with things. You know, it's although it doesn't look supernatural with all the plastic on it, I think it really mimics a lot of the behavior he would see in the wild.
Yes, it really does. And it doesn't have to look natural at all, but the behavior is natural. And he's doing his parrot wild behavior, which is really healthy and great. And we noticed that he's not like chewing on his feathers right now because he's busy working on that toy. You know, he's not doing any abnormal behaviors that would be a problem. You know, if birds don't have enrichment, they are prone to like pulling out their own feathers and doing other abnormal repetitive behaviors like that. And they can even end up really harming themselves by like chewing through their own muscles. And I've seen, like, I saw a really tragic case of a cockatoo who did that when I was working at the exotics vet, which got me like really passionate about this topic, because providing enrichment is the best way to keep birds healthy and to prevent them from doing those abnormal behaviors that could injure themselves. And hi, hey, buddy. And then, like you said, that toy, that woven mat, is not too expensive. Some people complain about birds destroying toys because they've spent a lot of money buying that toy, but the toy really should be destroyed. So if you can use something like a toilet paper roll or a phone book that's free or really, really cheap, that'll save you a lot of money, and they can still like have fun tearing it up.
It's like little kids, they prefer the packaging to the toys.
Yeah. If your toy comes in a cardboard box, give them that. Yeah.
One of the things I always tell people, I used to own a print shop, so I know more about ink than a lot of people. If you ever see a box or something with metallic ink, that's probably a really, really poor choice for your birds. Yeah. I also tend to avoid anything that's coated, anything with a glossy surface. But things like newsprint, newsprint is actually a vegetable-based ink. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
I'm always quite aware of what type of ink they have on things. I always look at what the paper or what the cardboard's made out of. If it looks like it's got a lot of glue in it, I tend to go, well, is there something better that I have? So toilet paper rolls seem to be pretty good, but I'm always super, super careful about what's in it, what's on it, on the advertising. This might be a super great, thick, crunchy piece of paper.
Yeah.
Well,
and we really want to.
Metallics, bird doesn't get it as much as he might like.
Yeah. Heavy metals are toxic to birds, so like, do you want to avoid anything with lead in it? And zinc can show up in some things, so be really careful about lead and zinc.
Zinc comes in a lot of these quick links. You can get the more expensive type from the hardware store. You have to search around for the stainless ones. That's the better choice.
Steel. Exactly. Steel is parrot safe as long as it's not mixed with anything, so look for just steel. Yeah. Hi. And
you're trying to get them kind of close there, bud.
Some birds do have issues with chewing and swallowing little pieces of plastic, so you do want to supervise your bird first when they're using a new toy, just to make sure they're not actually swallowing pieces of plastic. Most birds that I know are fine playing with plastic, and they'll just spit it out and it'll fall out of their beak. But if your bird's never had a plastic toy before, just like supervise them really closely, watch that beak and tongue really closely, and make sure all the plastic falls out onto the ground and is not being swallowed. Because if they swallow too much, it can cause blockages. And like you said with the glues, like you can, if there's glue just at the edge of something, you can sometimes cut the glue area out. And somebody did mention in some countries they have a lot of scented toilet paper, and you want to avoid things with strong scents. So don't use scented toilet paper or rolls from scented toilet paper. Just plain unscented toilet paper rolls are safe.
That's actually a really, really good tip as well. Some really great info here. I mean, the birds have so much that they can choose from. One thing I mentioned earlier with this food foraging toy that's in Tycho's cage, it does have a bell inside of it. You can hear it jangle. I fill it with shredded paper, and I actually just pick up, this type of paper from the dollar store. It's cheap. It's party decoration. The bird does not eat it, but he gets a chance to pull it out of the toy, and it's foraging behavior of sorts, and he enjoys it. So it's a cheap toy for him.
So I've had a question in the comments. I had one from Doc Maxi Peaches 3. How do I stop Peaches from biting and attacking my husband?
Excellent
so that
question.
Goes into another type of enrichment, which is positive reinforcement training. And positive reinforcement training is using a treat or a toy or something else that your bird really likes to reinforce or reward the good behaviors that your bird does. So instead of punishing your bird, like you know, in a violent way because they've bitten your husband. We want to catch a bird being good and reward those behaviors. And then we can shape new behaviors using that type of training. So we can teach a new behavior in small steps and build that up. You also need to think about the environment, and you can take, sometimes writing down in a notebook will work really well. Look at what is happening right before the bite occurs. What room of your house is it happening in? What is going on right then? And you can do a little behavior analysis of what might be triggering the bite. Usually, you know, it may be that the bird doesn't want to be put back in the cage and is biting right when you go to put the bird back in the cage. And in that case, you can easily train a go into your cage behavior. So you would reward the steps of the bird moving towards the cage and going into the cage, reward that with treats, and practice that a bunch of times. And then you can put that on cue. So you can have a word that says, like, you could just say, go to your cage, and then your bird will fly or walk into the cage, and then they'll get a treat once they're in there. But it is a process, and it does take a lot of time. So if you are having biting problems, I definitely recommend that you talk to me. You can DM me, you can message me on Instagram, and we can talk about setting up a consultation so that I can do spend an hour talking with you through Skype to analyze the situation in the home, come up with, I would do, you know, I'm trained in behavioral analysis, and I would perform a behavior analysis to predict what is causing the problem behavior, in this case the biting, and then how we can change the environment and come up with a training plan that's all force-free and very fun for your bird, that will solve the problem for you. So yeah, do send me a message if you want to set up a consultation. And then we had a question about Max's behavior. I guess at one point he fluffed out the feathers on his cheeks, and someone was asking what that means. What do you think fluffing the cheeks means for Max, Nicole?
Well, sometimes it depends on what some of the other body behavior is. Fluff and chops for him, like right now he's fluffing out a little bit.
Yeah.
He's relaxed, he's happy. He's beginning to say, you know, I might be getting a little bit bored where I'm at. I want a little bit of attention. I've got a bit of a scritch happening, you know, but a lot of times it's paired with the other body behavior. Now with birds, it can be hard to read the body behavior. You know, they don't have the same expression on a face that a person would. I mean, a person, you see teeth, you see a smile, you see eyes narrow, but even on a bird, you can see how the eyes are reacting. I mean, Max's eyes are really, really dark. You're not going to see too much. Tycho, where are you? Oh, there you are, up there. Yeah. Tycho's eyes, you can see, are quite open. And Tycho, it's very easy to read his expression from his eyes, narrowed, or flashing pupils. Flashing pupils either means really upset or really excited or, oh my gosh, I love this. But I never just look at one thing like the fluffed feathers. I look at the combination and I say, what's everything saying to me? Now, one thing about birds, and I will tell everybody this, I mean, I've had Tycho since he was 6 months old and he's now 22. He came to us as a baby and came from a pet shop, and this is before I even understood rescues were available. Max is a rescue. He was living in a basement, biting, screaming nonstop. He was the Amityville Horror with wings. If you want his full story, I've got that on YouTube. And I mean, I couldn't handle him when I first met him, and he still has some behaviors that, you know, come from when he grew up. I mean, the first 10 years he had food insecurity. He lived in a basement. He was yelled at. Now he seems pretty happy, but a bird can change his mind in a minute. I mean, it's not if you get bitten by a bird, it's when. And if the bird bites me, I usually look and I ask, what did I do that caused that bite? Tycho
Yeah, so
sometimes
that's the
gets upset with the
analysis.
cell phone. I understand, and he's gotten
Hmm.
a little bit better since he's associated the cell phone with squash. But that's why
Good,
you don't
yeah.
see as much of him on. But he'll
Hmm.
sometimes get mad that the cell phone steals my attention away from him, so I get bit.
Yeah.
And he doesn't fight very often, but for him, there's always a reason. The biggest
Yeah, there's always a reason for the behavior.
I'm a
And you just
person
have to
with
analyze
reason,
and find
but
that out.
in his
Yeah.
brain, it is fully justified. You know, he had every right in the world. The biggest thing I tell people is do not reward the behavior. I mean, if the bird bites you and you scream and you give him all sorts of drama,
Yeah.
the bird's going to go, woohoo, I'm bored. I think I'll give somebody a bite and see what sort of show
Yeah.
they can put on for
Because then I'll
me.
get some entertainment. And yeah.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
it's what you link the bite with. Usually, like if
Hmm.
if Chico bites me, I will give him a dirty look and immediately do what he doesn't want. Like if he's biting to go home, he's not going to get put home, but he will get put down. He'll get a dirty look. I, and he can read a human dirty look. I mean, if you give him the look that goes, what the, he'll look at you and he'll sort of go, what did I do to deserve that? I don't yell at him. I don't hit him. I just give him that look of disapproval, and he understands it. But I try
So,
whatever I do, I try not to reward the behavior. I mean, I've been
mhm.
scored on pretty good, and with beak Max's size, that can really hurt. But you
Yeah.
ask what precipitated it? Why did this happen? And
Hmm.
that I think can be the biggest thing. One reason birds will
Um,
sometimes bite is, it's territorial. Max, once a
okay,
year, he
exactly. Yeah.
thrives for it.
Um, that
Once
leads me into like my thesis research was looking at territorial behavior, and I was amazed to see that in an aviary full of 50 individual African greys, the whole time I was doing my study, I didn't see any birds biting each other. But they did have territorial behavior, and they worked things out in a way, where they were communicating with each other. There was sort of a back and forth, like one bird walking towards the other and the other backing off. That happened frequently, so that it didn't get as intense as a fight with biting. It was just walking towards and then walking away to avoid any more violent interaction. There were also a lot of body postures that I recorded, and those are available, and I can share those with everyone. I had put together an ethogram, which is a list of all the social behaviors of African greys that I saw during my study. And sometimes I saw a parrot lift one leg, and that could actually be a posture that said, hey, can you give me some space and back off? The greys didn't cuddle with each other. They gave each other a lot of space. They had a lot of, it seems like they have a lot of personal space needs. The only time they would be really close, like touching each other, was when they were already basically in a mated pair with another individual that they'd spent a long time courting and building that mated relationship. But otherwise, they would give each other space, and even when they're sitting up on a perch, roosting and about to go to sleep, the birds would be spaced out. You'd see mated pairs sitting together, but then you'd have a space, and then an individual, and then a space, and then a couple more individuals who were in a mated pair next to each other. So I think that's something that we forget about a lot. We think that pets are ours to just do whatever we want to do with, and we think that they're cute, and so we want to, we're, as humans, our natural behavior is to use our hands and to feel things and grab things. So a lot of people will reach into a bird's personal space, and then they'll get bitten because they've really broken that personal space bubble. They didn't really have the bird's consent to do that touch, and so they'll get a bite to tell them to back off and give them some space because they aren't wanting to have that close contact right then. And sometimes you can learn to read your bird's body language, so you can predict that. And Also, just like letting your bird come to you instead of the other way around. So if your bird comes to you on their own, then you know that they want to be close to you, as opposed to if you just go in right up next to your bird, you might be invading their personal space and you might be more likely to get bitten.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it happens. I mean, Tycho, as I said, absolutely hates the phone. You saw me put down the phone a minute ago so I could go pick him up off the floor. And
Right. Yeah.
he actually took a swipe at me while I did that. And, you probably heard a little bit of flapping because he didn't want to let go. So I just made him very unstable. So all of a sudden, instead of thinking about biting me, it's like, whoa, 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 what's happening with this perch? He stepped off immediately. And then I walked away. I mean, that was that. But he was giving me the message of, okay, lady, that's enough of the phone in my face. And I mean, I can
because he doesn't
respect
like
that.
the phone. Right.
Max loves the
And
phone.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, a phone can totally be a really scary object to a bird, and they might really not like the phone in their face for a bunch of reasons. Or they could be really jealous of the phone because you might spend time on your phone and like not pay attention to them. I've seen that happen. So they just get mad when the phone comes out. And then you could, like you said, he's learning, Tycho is slowly learning that the phone is associated with the squash, so it's becoming less of a scary negative thing. So that's the type, that's positive reinforcement, or actually it's called counter conditioning, when you pair something that they don't like with something that they do like. So eventually you build up they go from disliking it to be not caring about it to then liking it if it's paired multiple times with something really, really good.
Oh yeah, for Max sees the phone as it's playtime. I pull it out,
Yeah.
he wants to play, it's his way of interacting with me, and that's actually grown a lot, and that's how he's grown his Instagram so much, is just he loves the phone. So I think that's something where Chico's jealousy of the phone comes up. But I just respect that Tycho does not want a phone in his face, and sometimes it's like, he needs to train us because we're just dumb humans. We don't necessarily understand the way of the bird, and we, no chewing on that, not the chair, just the paper. But it's all about reading the bird and starting to understand. So I thought maybe we could spend a few minutes just going back down into the comments. Do we have any questions out there? Throw us some of your questions.
Yeah,
I see. I know we've had a few. I'm going to scroll back here and see what I can find.
Yeah, I see one. I've seen one. I see one here from Chris0918 that says, "I was going to ask about hissing and mangling their feathers."
That's a good question.
So both can be abnormal. Like hissing can be an aggressive behavior. Mangling their feathers, it sounds like abnormal behavior, like feather damaging. So feather damaging behavior, if they're chewing on their feathers, messing them up, tearing them out, and feather picking, pulling them out, those are signs of stress. And so that's kind of where enrichment comes in. We want to, and also some positive reinforcement training so that we can reduce that stress. If you're seeing your bird damaging their own feathers, it is time to get in touch with a qualified parrot behaviorist like myself, so that we can change that behavior before it becomes worse, because it actually is addictive. So you've seen Max and Tycho today chewing, and they're doing all this great chewing with their beaks, but they're chewing on cardboard, on netting, on the acorn squash. They aren't chewing on their own feathers, but chewing is a natural behavior that parrots need to express. And so if they're not given enrichment like acorn squash or cardboard, then they don't have much to chew except for their own feathers. So that's one theory behind how they might start chewing on their feathers and destroying them. And then that can turn sometimes into pulling the feathers out. And feather picking is thought to be addictive because when they pull a feather out, they get an adrenaline rush from the pain, and that's a little bit of excitement. And it also, so it reduces their boredom for a moment, and it also reduces their stress level because of that adrenaline. So then once they've pulled out one feather, they want to pull out more to get that adrenaline rush from that little bit of pain. And then that can turn into the really bad self-harming that I've seen at the vet, where they're actually chewing and biting themselves. They're like, their skin is being all these big wounds. So starting with an early behavioral intervention, like as soon as you see that, is highly recommended so that it doesn't progress into something worse where they pull out all their feathers or then injure themselves really, really badly. But providing all this enrichment is a really important step to take. So just make sure they have lots of options of things to chew throughout the day so those beaks are always occupied. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, you wouldn't if you lived in a cage, you wouldn't want to sit in the cage bored all day. You know, you'd want something to do. And I mean, right now you see Max is playing with paper and a plastic ring. You know, he's twirling it, he's throwing it around. You know, you'd argue that's not a natural toy, but for him, you know, that's probably something he would do in nature when he's foraging, is playing with, you know, bits of wood or feather or leaves or something, and it just gives him something to do, and you know he loves it. So listen to your bird. You know, what do they enjoy doing? So
I found another question here, if you're ready. There's a question from Gravity Starshine. It says, will it make them live longer or something? Yeah, enrichment can definitely make them live longer because it can prevent them from injuring themselves, and if you're doing enrichment with like a squash, like the acorn squash, that's very nutritious. It has lots of vitamins. It will make, you know, so giving them healthy, nutritious food like a squash to eat will help their overall health, and that can increase their lifespan. But yeah, it also just stops them from having mental health problems. So it stops them from being anxious and frustrated and performing a lot of strange, abnormal behaviors. It kind of stops them. So enrichment helps keep them mentally healthy so they're not going insane in captivity and not getting really depressed or frustrated. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting comment, is it keeps them from going insane in captivity. I'm just going to flip myself around here because I plugged in my phone and I wound up on the wrong side of it. And, you know, it's, you know, think of the enrichment as work for the birds. I mean, what are they doing while you're at work? What's their job? Tycho's job is to destroy squash. He's the destroyer of squash, and he takes his job seriously. He likes to destroy paper. I mean, right now he's over on his play stand. He's got some toys in his thing up here. You know, he's got some rings that he'll climb on, and there's some paper at the bottom. He'll hang out there for a while. He'll be quite happy about it. Max is still playing on the chair. It's back to its normal location, and he's making a huge mess. But this is what birds do. It's their job. You know, it's they can't just pick up a book or watch TV show.
Right. And, you know, even if they're similar to people, you know, if a person doesn't have anything to do, like, it's very cruel to keep people in solitary confinement, and people who are kept in solitary confinement tend to have bad mental health problems. And so, you know, everybody needs something to do and some way to be occupied. I'm
getting a countdown here. We're timing out on this. So I'd like to thank Joanna for joining us, and we'll try and arrange this again.